this episode, we're going to slow down and lock in the ideas that sit underneath smart SOC tooling decisions, because the exam and real-world operations both punish fuzzy thinking in this area. When people imagine a Security Operations Center, SOC, they often picture screens full of alerts and analysts racing around. But that picture skips the quieter choices that determine whether the center is effective or constantly struggling. Tooling is not just a shopping decision, and it is not just a technical preference, because every tool shapes what you can see, what you can trust, and how quickly you can act when something goes wrong. Integrations matter just as much as the tools themselves, because security work happens across systems, not inside a single product, and data only becomes useful when it can move cleanly and safely between components. By the end of this review, you should be able to mentally connect tools to outcomes, integrations to reliability, and secure implementation habits to long-term stability, without needing to memorize brand names or specific product menus. A helpful way to review SOC tooling is to picture the center as a system that takes in signals, turns them into meaning, and supports decisions under pressure, because that sequence reveals what the tools are actually for. At the beginning of the chain, you have collection and visibility tools that gather logs, events, and other telemetry, which are simply observations about what happened on systems and networks. In the middle, you have storage and analysis tools that keep that telemetry organized and searchable, and they provide ways to enrich, correlate, and interpret it. At the end, you have response and workflow tools that help humans coordinate work, document decisions, and take action in a controlled way. When learners jump straight to a single tool category, like detection, they often miss that detection quality is limited by what gets collected and how it is normalized, and it is limited again by whether the response workflow makes sense for the organization. If you remember the chain from signals to meaning to decisions, you can quickly judge whether a tooling choice supports the whole mission or only creates a shiny but fragile middle. Tooling choices become clearer when you separate what the tool does from where it sits, because many tools can appear in different forms while serving the same function. A log source might send events directly to a central platform, or it might pass through a collector that buffers and standardizes the data. But the core need is still getting trustworthy events to the place where they can be used. A detection capability might be built into a platform, or it might be a separate engine that consumes standardized data, but the underlying purpose is still recognizing patterns that indicate malicious behavior or risky conditions. A case management workflow might live in a ticketing system, a dedicated incident platform, or even a shared system designed for collaboration. But the basic need is consistent triage, ownership, and documentation. When you evaluate tools at the function level first, you stop getting distracted by surface features and you start asking practical questions, like whether the tool improves visibility, reduces uncertainty, or speeds decisions without adding unnecessary risk. That shift is one of the most important review habits because it helps you avoid tool decisions based on hype or familiarity. Integrations are the bridges between tool functions, and reviewing integrations means reviewing how information and authority move through the SOC. Information movement includes basic data flow, like sending logs from endpoints to a central store, but it also includes enrichment flow, like adding identity context from a directory or asset context from an inventory system. Authority movement is more subtle because it involves permissions and control, such as when an alerting system is allowed to trigger containment actions or when analysts can query sensitive data stores. Good integrations are designed, documented, and monitored because a broken integration can silently erase visibility and leave the SOC blind in exactly the place it thinks it has coverage. Poor integrations are often discovered only during an incident, when a team realizes alerts are missing, timestamps are inconsistent, or key fields were never mapped correctly. If you want a compact, spaced review question to ask yourself, it is whether an integration has clear inputs, clear outputs, and clear accountability for keeping it healthy over time. That single mental check can prevent an entire category of failures that come from assuming connectivity equals reliability. A beginner-friendly way to remember secure implementation habits is to treat every tool as both a sensor and a target, because security tools often sit in privileged positions. Sensors are valuable because they can see sensitive information, such as authentication events, file access patterns, or network connections, and that means the tool can become a privacy risk if it is mismanaged. Targets are valuable because attackers love to disable detection, hide evidence, or steal data, and a central monitoring platform can be an especially high-value prize. Secure implementation habits begin with the basics of access control, which means limiting who can administer a tool, limiting who can change detection logic, and limiting who can view sensitive datasets. They also include protecting credentials and secrets, because integrations often require tokens, keys, or service accounts, and those become shortcuts to many systems if they are exposed. A SOC that collects everything but fails to secure the tools that hold it all is building a powerful surveillance and compromise platform for an attacker, which is why implementation discipline matters as much as collection ambition. Another spaced review anchor is the concept of least privilege, because it ties together tooling, integrations, and secure habits into a single practical idea. Least privilege means each person, service, or integration gets only the access needed to do its job, and nothing more, which reduces the damage from mistakes and reduces the value of stolen credentials. In a SOC context, that might mean an analyst can search events but cannot change collection rules, while an engineer can adjust parsing but cannot approve response actions without oversight. It also means integrations should be narrowly scoped, so a connector that needs to read authentication logs should not also have permissions to modify user accounts, unless there is a specific and justified reason. Beginners often assume that broad access makes operations faster, but broad access actually makes operations riskier, and risk eventually slows everything down through outages, incidents, and loss of trust. When you think about least privilege during review, do not treat it as a moral slogan, because it is really an engineering choice that shapes safety and resilience. Tooling decisions also benefit from reviewing data quality concepts, because tools can only produce good results when the data has consistent meaning. Data quality includes obvious things like completeness, meaning the events you expect are actually arriving. But it also includes correctness, meaning the fields represent what you think they represent. Normalization is a major part of this, because different systems describe the same idea in different ways, such as a username, a host, an IP address, or a process name, and the SOC needs those to line up across sources. Time synchronization is another easy-to-forget factor because investigations depend on event order, and even small clock drift can create confusing stories that waste analyst time. Context fields are also part of quality, because an event without a meaningful identity or asset reference is harder to triage, even if it is technically accurate. When reviewing, it helps to remember that detection logic is like a math problem, and messy data is like changing the meaning of the numbers halfway through, which makes even a good detector unreliable. A useful review lens for integrations is to think in terms of failure modes, because every integration will eventually fail in some way. Some failures are loud, like a connector that crashes and stops sending any data, and those are easier to notice. Other failures are quiet, like a parsing change that drops one critical field, or a vendor update that renames an event type, and those can quietly degrade detection for weeks. Backpressure and buffering are also common issues, where a pipeline becomes overloaded and events are delayed, which can make real-time monitoring feel normal while it is actually hours behind. Duplicate events can appear as well, and they can inflate alert volumes and create false impressions about activity levels. Secure integrations must include monitoring and alerting about the integration itself, because an unmonitored pipeline is an untrusted pipeline. When you revisit integrations in your mind, practice asking what breaks first, how you would notice, and what the safe fallback behavior should be. Secure implementation habits also include configuration hygiene, which is a set of behaviors that keep tools understandable and auditable over time. Configuration hygiene means changes are deliberate, documented, and reviewable, rather than being quick fixes that only one person understands. It includes consistent naming conventions for rules, data sources, and workflows, because confusion during an incident often comes from unclear labels and inconsistent organization. It also includes separating development and production changes when possible, so experiments do not accidentally degrade core monitoring. Version control and change logging are part of hygiene as well, because the ability to answer what changed and when is essential when a detection suddenly becomes noisy or goes silent. Beginners sometimes believe hygiene is administrative overhead, but it is actually what keeps a SOC from becoming dependent on tribal knowledge and memory. A clean configuration environment is like a clean workspace because it reduces friction, reduces errors, and makes learning and handoffs easier. Another review concept that connects tooling to outcomes is the idea of coverage versus capability, because it is easy to confuse having a tool with having protection. Capability is what the tool can do in theory, such as collecting events, correlating patterns, or triggering actions. Coverage is what you are actually collecting and monitoring in your environment, across the systems that matter most, during the times that matter most. A team might have a powerful analysis platform, but only feed it a small subset of critical logs, which creates the illusion of security while leaving real gaps. Similarly, a team might deploy sensors widely but fail to integrate identity and asset context, which makes alerts hard to interpret and slows response. Reviewing this distinction helps you avoid the trap of thinking the presence of technology equals readiness. The exam often rewards candidates who recognize that effectiveness comes from selecting the right tools, integrating them properly, and operating them reliably, not from collecting a long list of products. It is also worth reviewing how workflow tools relate to security outcomes, because the SOC is ultimately a human system that must coordinate under uncertainty. Workflow includes how alerts become cases, how cases get assigned, how escalations happen, and how decisions get recorded, and tooling choices can either support or undermine that process. If analysts cannot easily capture what they saw and why they made a decision, the team loses learning and repeats mistakes. If ownership is unclear, work gets duplicated or abandoned, and response slows down while uncertainty grows. If integrations do not tie alerts to relevant context, analysts waste time gathering basic information, and that time delay increases impact. Good workflow design does not require fancy features, but it does require consistency, clarity, and a shared understanding of what done looks like for an alert or case. When you review tooling and integrations, always pull the thread forward to the human steps, because a tool that increases confusion is effectively reducing security, even if it looks impressive in a demo. A final tooling review point is the importance of secure defaults and hardening, because security tools often ship with settings meant for convenience rather than protection. Hardening starts with disabling unnecessary interfaces, tightening network exposure, and ensuring administration paths are protected, because a management console exposed to the wrong network becomes an easy entry point. It includes strong authentication, ideally with multi-factor controls, and careful session management to reduce the risk of hijacking. It also includes patch and update practices, because security tooling is software, and software has vulnerabilities, and attackers do not avoid security products just because they are security products. Logging the security tools themselves is another critical habit, because you need visibility into administrative actions, configuration changes, and integration errors, especially when investigating suspicious activity. If you can remember one spaced review phrase, it is that the monitoring system must itself be monitored, because that captures the idea that tools are part of the attack surface. Building that reflex is a key marker of mature thinking, even for a beginner learner. As we close out this spaced review, keep the mental picture of the SOC as a connected system where tools collect signals, platforms create meaning, and workflows support decisions, because that picture makes the whole topic easier to retain. The right tooling choices come from matching functions to needs, and the right integrations come from designing reliable, observable pipelines rather than hoping systems will stay connected. Secure implementation habits protect the powerful position these tools hold, using least privilege, configuration hygiene, hardening, and monitoring of the tooling itself. When these pieces fit together, analysts spend more time making confident decisions and less time fighting noise, confusion, or missing data. If you carry forward one exam-ready takeaway, it should be that effective SOC operations come from deliberate choices and disciplined operation, not from a single magic product or a pile of disconnected technology.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.